Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. I'm Rob, and today we're going to be taking a look at the KLIPSCH Reference Dolby ATMOS surround sound system from Costco. We've had a lot of requests to take a look at this setup and give you our opinion on how it performs. So if you're in the market for a set of speakers at a great price, then stick around and we'll get into it right after the intro. Now, as we mentioned, this 5-speaker system is sold by Costco, and at the time of this recording can be bought online for $7.99 or in the store for $6.99. And I guess the extra $100 is for shipping or something like that. One thing to remember, and I'm sure most of you Costco members know this all too well, is that Costco stock is constantly changing. One day they'll have pallets full of items, and the next day they'll be completely gone with no guarantee they'll ever get them back in stock again. I also want to mention here that Costco also sells the KLIPSCH R-12SW, which is a matching subwoofer, and we went ahead and bought it so we could let you know if it's a good addition to this system. And just to demonstrate how good of a value this system is, I wanted to do something a little different. So real quick, I'm going to break down this entire set, speaker by speaker, and see how much you'd end up paying if you bought each part individually. This KLIPSCH 5.0.2 system comes with a pair of towers called the R-625FA, which KLIPSCH sells at an MSRP of $689 per speaker. Though after doing some research online, we found out that you can get these speakers from a few different retailers for about $520 each. And we'll put that number right up here so you can keep track of it as well. This system also comes with the KLIPSCH R52C center channel speaker, which retails for $289 from KLIPSCH's website, but in reality you can find it for around $220, so we'll go ahead and add that to the total. And finally, you'll also get a pair of KLIPSCH R41M bookshelf speakers for surrounds, which are listed on KLIPSCH's website for $229. And again, we were able to find these for around $170 from other retailers like Crutchfield. And of course, if you shop around a little, you might even find even better deals for these speakers. Alright, so let's go ahead and add up the numbers and see what we get. So for two of the towers, we end up at $1,040, plus $220 for the center channel, and $170 for the bookshelf speakers, which gives us a grand total of $1,430. On the other hand, if you buy the same system in-store at Costco for $700, you end up saving $730 over the sale price of each individual speaker from other retailers. And of course, it's even a bigger savings over MSRP price of $1,896. And if that isn't enough to convince you of what a great deal this system is, KLIPSCH has even thrown in a pair of 25-foot and a set of three 15-foot 16-gauge speaker cables. So as you can see here, this KLIPSCH system from Costco already represents a great value, and we haven't even started talking about the sound quality yet. But before we get into that, let's go ahead and take a look at each one of these speakers and talk about some of the specs and build quality. Starting with the two KLIPSCH R625FA tower speakers, we can see that each have a pair of 6.5-inch bass mid-range drivers with the classic copper-colored cones that KLIPSCH is famous for. These drivers are also ported out the back with what KLIPSCH refers to as their Track-Trix rectangular port. Moving on to the upper part of the speaker, KLIPSCH uses their aluminum compression dome tweeter, which they claim minimizes distortion. On the top of these towers, KLIPSCH has incorporated these built-in Dolby ATMOS speakers with a matching tweeter and a 5.25-inch woofer. These are designed to fire up into your ceiling to give the impression that sound effects are actually happening above you. Now, we normally don't recommend this as your first choice for Dolby ATMOS height speakers, but if you're in a space where you can't mount actual overhead speakers and your ceiling is no more than 8 feet high and completely flat, this may be the only option to get Dolby ATMOS sound. The finish on these speakers is actually nicely done, and considering that it's a textured vinyl, they actually did a really good job making them look like real wood grain. And speaking of the finish on these cabinets, which are made of MDF by the way, that brings me to one of my favorite parts of these speakers, the looks. I feel that KLIPSCH has always done a great job at producing high quality, premium looking speakers, and that seems to hold true here despite the low price. Things like the copper colored drivers and screws, the magnetic grills, and the overall fit and finish of the cabinet all come together to make a really great looking speaker. Speaking of the magnetic grills, it's really rare to see them on speakers this affordable, and it'd be great if all manufacturers put them on all of their entry-level models. With that said, they are a bit flimsy, but I don't think you'll have to worry about them breaking anytime soon, as long as you're not too rough with them. Moving on to the center channel, you're going to see a lot of the same features, like the finish, the 5-way binding post, along with the square Tratrix horn tweeter, and the same 5 1/4 inch woofers that were used in the Atmos speakers. Again, the cabinet is made of MDF, and really the only difference here is that this is a sealed box design, so there aren't any ports on the back of the speakers. The one thing we do want to mention is there are no mounting points for mounting this to a wall, so you'll need to figure out your own solution for that. And finally, taking a look at the R41M bookshelf speakers, you'll see the same horn tweeter design along with a 4-inch mid-range driver. Around the back, the cabinet is also ported, and it has a keyhole mount, which isn't the greatest, but it'll work. Just make sure you put the screw into a stud. Alright, that does it for the initial system, but as I mentioned before, Costco also sells the KLIPSCH R-12SW for an additional $200 when it's on sale, making this a 5.1.2 surround sound setup. And also, let us know in the comments if you'd be interested in us doing a full review on this subwoofer. So other than that, this sub is a ported box design with a 12-inch front-firing woofer, and the built-in digital amplifier delivers 200 watts RMS and 400 watts peak. Around the back, you have basic controls like gain, low-pass filter, auto standby on and off, phase, and RCA inputs. One thing we did notice with this sub is the finish does look slightly different than the speakers, and it doesn't quite match perfectly. Another thing I really don't care for with this sub is how the subwoofer driver doesn't match the drivers in the other speakers. It seems like KLIPSCH went through a lot of trouble trying to make the speaker drivers look like a brushed copper, but on the sub, it looks like they took a can of pumpkin colored spray paint and went over it a few times. Now, of course, none of this affects the way it sounds. It's just purely aesthetic, so we'd recommend keeping the grills on the sub. And speaking of the grill, this sub uses pins and cups instead of magnets to secure it to the subwoofer. Now, with all that out of the way, it was time to start listening to the system. And just to be fair, we started our listening test without the subwoofer, so we could get a feel of how much bass the speakers could produce without it. And before we get into how we felt about these speakers, I just want to say up front that I didn't have very high expectations for this system. In fact, I didn't even really want to review these speakers at first, because I didn't think that you could get decent sounding speakers for this price. But after many requests from our viewers to check out this system, and a very long discussion with my son, who really thought we should review these speakers, we decided to go ahead and give them a shot. And the first thing we noticed when unboxing them is just how well they seem to be built. I totally expected them to be light, hollow, and plasticky feeling, but to my surprise, that wasn't the case at all, and they're actually quite heavy and robust. Another thing that really caught me by surprise is just how good these speakers sound. My past experiences with horn-loaded tweeters have been less than ideal, and many times they can be too bright and sound a bit harsh. But to KLIPSCH's credit, I didn't notice any of that with these speakers. The speakers were very detailed, but I never noticed any listening fatigue with them. On the other hand, the one area where I think these are lacking a little is the mid-range. Female voices seem to be a little thin coming from the tower speakers, but still very acceptable, especially at this price point. Bass response was also pretty good, but using the subwoofer did make our music listening tests more enjoyable overall. Now, where these speakers really shine is for watching movies. Right off the bat, we noticed that this little center channel did a great job recreating vocals and details, but we did notice that it wasn't quite as natural sounding as some of the other, more expensive center channels we've reviewed. The towers also did a great job with movies, perfectly blending with the center channel and surrounds. Although we don't feel like they had a lot of bass extension, and for movies, we would always recommend pairing them with a good subwoofer. Throwing the KLIPSCH R-12SW into the mix, the entire system felt a lot more capable as far as bass reproduction goes, and although the sub isn't a bass monster, it did a respectable job filling in the lower frequencies even in our large open concept living room. Something else to keep in mind is that these speakers are very efficient. Going from our Yamaha RX-V663 to the Denon AVR S750H, everything still sounded good, and we never felt like the receiver was straining to power the system, despite its lower power rating of 75 watts per channel. We also think that the Yamaha RX-V6A or the Onkyo TX-NR595 receivers would be great matches for these speakers. And if you want to check out our reviews for those receivers, we'll leave links down in the description below. Now, after listening to the speakers and the sub, we wanted to get a better visual representation of how they sound in our room. So we went ahead and measured them with REW and a calibrated microphone with an audio interface. And here, as you can see, we start getting decent bass at around 28 Hz, and you can see here that we had a pretty big bump all the way up to 150 Hz. Other than that, there's also a noticeable dip in some areas between 1 and 4 kHz, which does explain why we felt like the mid-range might have been lacking a little in some areas. In the end, these graphs just represent the way the speakers sound in our untreated living room, which is far from ideal and does not reflect the actual performance of what you would get in your room. But some people really like seeing these measurements, so there you go. In the end, we were really taken back by just how good of a value this system represents. It's not going to give you exceptional sound quality, but it gets the job done at a very low cost, and that's what's so intriguing about the KLIPSCH 5.0.2 Reference Theater Pack from Costco. If you're new to home theater and you're looking to get into a great budget system at one of the lowest entry costs out there, we highly recommend you put this system in your shortlist. If you want to buy one for yourself, we'll leave a link in the description down below so you can check it out, or you can pick one up at a local Costco store. And with that said, I think it's time to wrap up this video. If you want to talk more about home theater, technology, and all of that stuff, we now have a Discord chat, which you can find a link to the description below, so go ahead and check that out. Please let us know if you have any questions or comments on the KLIPSCH 5.0.2 Reference Theater Pack, and we'll do our best to help you out. If you thought this video was helpful, don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring the bell so you don't miss any of our future content. And as always, have an awesome day.